Hey kids, it's Acre here. Just got a couple things I want to run by you real quick. I know this is coming during the week, and I'm just going to email it to you. But I wanted to respond to a couple things fairly quickly. First off, I'm really enjoying the discussion on the Mickey Mantle Cohen piece by Duncan. Some of you are beautiful writers already, and I'm loving the stories that you're sharing. And part of the purpose of that discussion was to get us to share our stories with each other and to get to know each other a little bit better. That's part of what that lesson is designed to do. But I also need to remind you that that lesson is designed to get you to read the thing and look at the symbolism and the structure of it, because that's what you're going to have to write about. So this discussion, the second purpose for this discussion is to get you thinking about those things, because you're going to have to produce a paper on them in just a few days. So if you go back and you look at your responses, if your response is commenting upon each other's personal stories and sharing your own personal stories, and things like that, that's wonderful. That's part of what the thing was designed to do. But if you're just doing that and not talking about the piece itself, for one thing, that doesn't show me any evidence that you've actually read the piece, which is a minor matter, but it also shows me that you may not be thinking about the paper that you're going to have to write in just a little bit. And if you're not thinking about it and practicing about it with each other, then it's going to be harder for you to write. So this is a kind of an informal peer review in a way. It's to get you to know each other, get us to know each other better, to get us to share our personal stories, and some of your stories are just really moving. But the discussion does have another purpose as well, and that's to get you thinking critically about the piece that you've read. So you might want to take another look at your responses and maybe add some more. I've been spending most of the day, or at least this afternoon, several hours writing back to you and suggesting and kind of poking at you a little bit with some sticks and stuff. So anyway, that's one. The other thing is the discussion about the forum deadlines. Apparently I created a little bit of misunderstanding. So let me give you just a tiny little bit of history to why things are the way they are. Some years ago, and it hasn't been that long ago, our online classes were very different from our face-to-face classes. That's where we got the lie started that online classes are easier, because frankly, in many cases, they probably were. In many of my colleagues, and I never did it this way, but some of my colleagues did, they'd set their class up so that everything was due, let's say, on a Sunday night, or Monday night in our case, whatever the deadline was. They'd set a deadline for the week, and nobody would do anything for the entire week, including the instructor, and then everybody would pop in for an hour on that Sunday night deadline and do all their work, including the instructors. Not all of them, not even a majority of them, but enough of them. So the state commission came in and they took a look at the way we were doing many of our online classes, and they said, no, you can't do it this way. Online classes must be as equal to face-to-face classes as you can make them. And what that means is the students must be required to participate more than an hour on Sunday afternoon. The students must be required to participate as much as they would be required to participate in an online face-to-face class. This must be the case, so you can't do it this way, the state said to us. And so it was like kicking over an anthill. We all got crazy, and luckily my classes have always been pretty rigorous, so my students never had to make the transition that some of you are having to make. But anyway, what most of us came up with, which would be the least onerous both to you and to the instructor, was we decided to try to do the forum discussions, which is a big part of your participation in the class. We decided to try to do those in two pieces, with some of it being due earlier in the week and some of it being due later in the week, so that it was as if you were going to class, so to speak, on a Tuesday and a Thursday, or a Monday and a Wednesday, or whatever the schedule would normally be. And frankly, the state said if you don't change and change right now, you're not going to be able to teach online. They were going to take our accreditation away. It was a big deal. And so we're scrambling, have been for a couple of years, to try to set this right and do things the right way. And it was easier for the instructors and easier for the students. There's no doubt about it. But the academic rigor was missing. And I think you're going to agree with me when I tell you that, when you go out there in the job world or the world of life, you're going to be competing with people who have had academic rigor. And you don't want your education to not have been equally rigorous, because the folks who've had more practice and more focus and have done more work, they're going to win. So you're going to be, you want to level the playing field by having your own education be as rigorous as, say, Stanford or Harvard or UCLA or Berkeley or Cal State. And the state basically said, you're not doing it that way, and you can't do it that way any longer. You have to step up to the plate and make your online classes as equal to your face-to-face classes as you possibly can. So the solution that most of us came up with was, forums you gotta step into the forum early in the week and do some stuff. Which doesn't mean that you can't do all your stuff for the week before 7 o'clock on Friday, but you have to do some things before Friday. And then you step back in and you participate some more after Friday. Just the same as if you went to class on a Monday and a Wednesday, or a Tuesday and a Thursday. So that was the solution that most of us came up with. It seems to be working pretty well. The students, of course, didn't like it at first because they were used to these lighter versions of their classes, and they liked it. Instructors liked it too, But the state said, no, you can't do it this way. So what I was offering in that discussion was, how can I best help you to meet that deadline? And the way I came up with, because it's the only way I know to do it, was to make them due on Friday at 7 a.m., even though they're really not, and we know they're all not. Just to remind students that you have to get your initial responses done fully by 7 o'clock on Friday morning. Last term, I wasn't doing it that way. I was remembering to remind my students by sending out emails to people who hadn't responded. I was remembering to remind them each week that of this deadline. And so one week I had one person who just got all up in my nose about the fact that one week I forgot to do it. I just plain old forgot. I am actually a human being, believe it or not, and I forgot. So I get this email, well, you didn't remind me, so I didn't think the rules applied this week. It's like, so, okay, you come to a stop sign, and I remind you to stop every time when we're riding together, and then one week I forget to remind you to stop, and you run right through the stop sign and you kill somebody. Is that my fault because you forgot about the rules? No, it isn't. I mean, it's a stupid analogy. Okay? So here's the deal about the 7 a.m. stuff. It is a fact of life, and it's been going on forever. That most of you, a goodly number of you, will wait until Friday morning or late Thursday night to do those posts. And I go in Friday morning and there's hundreds of posts. So it's a deal with me that I've always tried to be as interactive with my students. A lot of my online students tell me they get more interaction with their instructor, me, in an online class than they get in a lot of face-to-face classes. I work really hard, and I try very hard to be as interactive with my students as possible, meaning I'm in the forums, I'm talking to you, I'm making suggestions, I'm trying to guide you along and all that stuff. And I've already realized with a class of this size, we're still, I believe, at 64, 65 students and one of me. I realize that I am simply, there's not physically enough time in the week for me to be as interactive with my students as I would prefer to be. I mean, I love those conversations, I really do, and I love participating in them and guiding you as best I can toward the goal that we're all working toward. Yes, the deadline is 7 a.m. Friday morning, but you don't have to do it at 7 a.m. Friday morning. You can do it Tuesday morning and be done with it and forget about it. The problem is, and I appreciated a couple of you suggesting that I change the deadline to match the other deadlines, 11:55 on Friday night. But here's what will happen if I change that deadline. As it is now, a goodly portion of you go in on Thursday night, and you do your post. I wake up on Friday morning, and sometimes I have 300 or 400 posts to look at. So, and I know that's not going to change. I'm a realist. So I know that's the case I'm going to face. Well, Friday's a work day, so I give up my Friday to interact with you in the forums because I feel morally obligated to do so. Okay? But Friday's a work day. So that's what I do. If I make the deadlines, say midnight on Friday night, I bet my next 3 paychecks I will wake up on Saturday morning, which is not a work day, and there will be 400 posts, and I will have to give up my entire Saturday and possibly Sunday. So that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to kill myself with my own ethics about my own work ethic. So that's a fact of life. And if I make if I make the deadline noon on Wednesday, there'll be 400 responses go in at 11:55 on Wednesday. It's just a fact of life. You guys all forget, you postpone, you procrastinate, and you do it. It's not a criticism. We're human beings. That's what we do. So if I change the deadline, and I appreciate the thought behind the concern, if I change the deadline to midnight on Friday, then I will have to work all day Saturday and possibly all day Sunday. That's not going to happen. So the question I was asked was, remember the deadline, the final time you can do it is 7 o'clock on Friday morning. That doesn't mean you have to do it at 6:45 on Friday morning. You've got all day all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and all day Thursday to get those initial responses in. That's 3 days. 3 24-hour days. That's a lot of time. But still, they all sort of bunch up on Thursday night, Friday morning. I know that's going to happen. So remember that 7 a.m. is the deadline of a 3-day time period that you have to get them in. And then you have your weekends, relatively. One of the reasons I made the deadline at 7 o'clock is so you won't be worrying about trying to work to do your forum posts on Saturday. So I feel like I've got to leave the forum deadline at 7 a.m. Friday for the simple fact that it will be physically impossible for me to manage the workload if I change that up. So what I was asking was, shall I continue to remind you by having that deadline in the calendar or not? There are 3 ways I can do it. I can have the deadline in the calendar so that it pops into your calendar so that it helps you remember. Or I can take that deadline away and make the actual hard deadline on Monday night. Or I can try to remember to remind you, but what if I forget, and then some 2 or 3 folks might think the rules are suspended because I forgot to remind you about the rules. Or I can just say the things are due at 7 a.m. on Friday, and you're on your own. Remember it however you need to remember it, or else. So The way to make it absolute is to have the deadline be on Friday at 7 a.m. The way to have you be more in control of it is for me to say they're due Friday 7 a.m. Do it or don't do it. You're adults, this is college, and I'm not your mother. So I'm always walking this really thin line between, helping my students negotiate this complex system. And it's not just my class. College is complex. And it's hard at times. And I've been there and done that. So I'm walking the line between trying to help my students negotiate the system and be successful. There's that, and then there's my tendency to do things for you that, quite frankly, you should be doing for yourself. And there's a thin line between those two worlds, and I'm not very good at negotiating that. And so the question I was asking anyway was not, shall we change the deadline? I don't see how I can possibly change the deadline, nor can I change the expectations. This is what the state of California told us we have to do if we want to continue to teach online. And this is happening all over the state. There are other places in worse shape than we are. So I can't change the expectations. And I really can't change the deadlines for reasons that I hope will make sense to you. But we can talk about how I can help you meet the deadline. I mean, in the real world, frankly, you should know it's 7 a.m. on Friday, and you should meet the deadline or not, and get on with it. But I know that the world that we all live in, you need some help, and I don't mind helping, but I'm not going to kill myself over it. So there's the deal. I guess the question what I'm going to do, I think, right now is I'm probably going to leave the deadline. Those of you who answered the question I asked seem to think you like having that deadline popping on your calendar so it helps you remember. If I take that away, then you're going to have to depend on me to remind you, and I may or may not remember in some weeks. Or you're going to have to figure out some way to remind yourself. So if I leave that hard and fast 7 a.m. Friday deadline, that will, I believe, help some of you to manage the workload. Again, remember, Friday at 7 a.m. is the last time you can do it. The first time you can do it is at 12:01 on Tuesday morning. You've got 3 whole days. And if you can get your stuff in earlier, that's going to help me manage the workload too. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking right at the moment. If you want to give me more thoughts in that forum, I would love to hear them. And I hope you understand, I'm not complaining about the workload. The workload is the workload. I've been having workloads like this, for 20 years. I know what they're like. I know what they're like. The workload is the workload. It is what it is, and I'm fairly well paid to do this work. I'm not complaining about the workload. What I'm telling you is, there being one of me and 64 of you, there are certain workloads that one human being simply cannot manage. And if we switch that deadline, that's going to be something I simply can't manage, which means I'm going to have to ignore most of your forum posts. And I'm not going to do that. My ethics will not allow me to completely ignore you, because that's how we got into trouble in the first place. And I love the interaction with my students, and I'm not going to deprive myself of that. So I know it's an imperfect system, and I'm just trying to help you manage and me manage as best we can, and be successful. Okay, so I've talked way too long. I'm shutting up now. But those are my thoughts right now. I'm going to send this out to you. And if you want to continue the discussion, it's fine. But what I'm asking you is not, shall we change the deadline? And I'm sorry if I created that fallacy. What I'm asking you is, do you want me to continue to remind you in one way or another, or do you want me to leave you completely on your own, and just apply the penalties if you miss the deadline? That's what I'm asking. Okay, thanks so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.